Hello, my name is Tolg, and I exist, therefore I think too much. So I I will be doing this, I think. I'm gonna read Friedrich Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil. And I figured I'd start with the preface. It is copywritten 2024. By Arcturus Publishing Limited. And then it gives their address, which I don't think I should give. And it's translated by Helen Zimmern. I was going to start with the preface. I can only assume that Helen Zimmern wrote the preface, especially for how it starts out. This will be me reading it for the first time. I got a lot of my library because it's things that I wanted to read, but never felt diligent enough to do so, and figured I'd have fun having my own library rather than going to one to rent. So that's essentially why these videos exist. So I will be experiencing it at the same time that you are, through me, unfortunately for you, and I will be ranting, which means that I will also be cussing. And if you don't like cussing, you can go away. I'm not monetized. I am not beholden onto anybody that would hold me to not cussing. So. And it starts out, supposing that truth is a woman, capitalized so an entity unto itself, what then? Is there not ground for suspecting that all philosophers, insofar as they have been dogmatists, have failed to understand women? The supposition is that dogma is not related to women? Cool. That the terrible seriousness and clumsy importunity with which they have usually paid their addresses to truth have been unskilled and unseemly methods for winning a woman. Why would you have to win truth? You are either true or you are not. And while truth can be subjective and objective, that still remains truth, and I don't know that it can be won. It is had or it is not. It is lived by or it is not. And if you're clumsily going about courting truth, you have more problems than what the fuck you intend to date. You might want to go get therapy. Certainly, she has never allowed herself to be won. Okay, and at present, every kind of dogma stands with sad and discouraged mien. Mien. Mine? Mien? If, indeed, it stands at all. Rhetorical. And there are scoffers who maintain that it has fallen. Truth has fallen? Everybody's a liar? Certainly there's a reason to lie. Absolutely. You're saving a life? Lie your ass off. Why not? In defense of another person, in defense of yourself, if things are going to go awry if you do not lie, fucking lie, and I tell my significant other, tell me the truth when it's important, but lie if it'd save me. Don't tell me something that's going to cost me for knowing it. And I stand by that. Although the problem is when they cannot tell a lie without having reads. I hate that shit. For there are scoffers who maintain that it has fallen, that all dogma lies on the ground. Okay, so dogma is truth? That's bullshit. I did have to look it up because I am not educated, mind you. Haha. So dogma is defined as 1, a doctrine or a corpus of doctrines relating to matters such as morality and faith, set forth in an authoritative manner by a religion. Or 2, a principle or statement of ideas, or a group of such principles or statements, especially when considered to be authoritative or accepted uncritically. And 3, that which is held as an opinion, a tenet, a doctrine. So in none of this is it at all related to a truth. Especially in number 2, which I think it would relate most to a group of such principles or statements, given that this is, philosophy, and philosophy deals with morals and ethics and trying to put thought behind pattern. Especially when considered to be authoritative or accepted uncritically. And the last part of it makes me giggle. Accepted uncritically. Yeah. A large part of majority is still taught in college today, and you see a bunch of college students. I don't know that you see it much in adults, but, going around and after learning of these authors, spouting the name or name dropping, essentially, just to be able to tout the claim that they did at the very least read it. And I don't know that much is thought through critically at all. So long as you're told that it's worth knowing, then it's worth knowing. And I think that's a fault of humanity. Certainly, absolutely, forebearers of knowledge should be read, but they should not be accepted as point-blank objective truth. That's as folly. It's really stunting, as well as what you could expound on yourself. So I don't agree with any of this, and this just sounds like someone talking to talk. Dogma lies on the ground, nay more that it is at its last gasp. Cool. But to speak seriously, there are good grounds for hoping that all dogmatizing in philosophy, whatever solemn, whatever conclusive and decided airs it has assumed, may have been only a noble pluralism and tyrannism. No. Everybody is going to write something so that, if challenged, they are still presenting as though what they say has ground. I presume anybody writing anything philosophical has done a lot of thinking, and therein, tried their damnedest to come with the most objective form of reality they could contemplate. And so the fact that someone wrote it with errors does not necessarily mean that these errors ought to be followed onto anyone's entirety. People should still be able to challenge things, and the tyranny is not in the writer. If there's tyranny at all, it's in the presumption that someone would want that. It's in the followers saying, keep your head down lest we all get hit with a hammer. The nail that sticks up gets hit with a hammer, and I guess everyone else is afraid of feeling the shock from that. Crabs in a bucket, everybody pulls each other down. I don't know which one works better there. But I don't think the tyranny is in the philosopher themselves, but in anybody following the doctrine or the rhetoric. If you absolutely that too. If you speak against any of these, solidified philosophers, then you're a cunt, because not only are you challenging the philosopher, but you are challenging at least 100 years worth of knowledge that people have lived by and sworn by. Don't rock the boat. And probably the time is at hand when it will be once and again understood what has actually sufficed for the basis of such imposing and absolute philosophical edifices as the dogmatists have hitherto reared. Again, I don't think it's the philosophers doing that. I think it's the followers saying, this is so wordy. I don't think it needs to be this wordy. If the philosophical edifices are imposing an absolute, it's because people have to present their ideas as though they are such. It isn't because that is how they are in absolution. anybody selling a product needs to sell it as though it is the product you should buy. I don't think that's at the fault of anybody writing or selling. It's at the fault of the buyer for presuming that it is perfection. Perhaps some popular superstition of immemorial times, such as the soul superstition, is this arguing the soul? That the soul is a superstition? Oh, that's one hell of a claim from the get. But okay, you could just say argument instead of just right out claiming, superstition. Seems like you're the tyrant. But whatever. Which, in the form of subject and ego superstition, are we now contemplating if the ego exists? Whoa. Has not yet ceased doing mischief. I don't think this person likes to think. It's fun to think. I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps some play upon words, a deception on the part of grammar, or an audacious generalization of very restricted, very personal, very human, all too human facts. This person just desperately wants to be objective and perfect and essentially God. That's why they would, shit on egotism, is because they are an egotist. And being all too human is bad. Get fucked. It's part of being human. Fuck out of here. The philosophy of the dogmatists, it is to be hoped, was only a promise for thousands of years afterwards, as was astrology in still earlier times. Dogma is a promise? Dogma is a rhetoric meant to... It's, I guess metaphorically I would equate it to parenting. Everybody goes into parenting as saying, I would assume, a perfect version of parenting, in my understanding, would be knowing that you are a limited human and doing your best by whichever being came out of the vagina. Doing your best to indicate to this being, this is what you exist in, this is as much as we understand of what you exist in, and this is how to navigate around you. It is guiding. And dogma is essentially exactly that role. It is a guiding force with the amount of information that the person accumulated themselves, and doing their best to guide anybody that might come across it. It does not necessarily mean that it is perfectly objective. So I feel like this person didn't care about what they were writing, maybe, and thought it sounded good, because the promise of dogma, they're doing their best, man. Can that be a promise more than it's just, a hope? A curiosity is really all I've understood of philosophy, is that someone was wildly curious about a specific topic and did their best to fucking understand it. If you're following that as though it is a promise of understanding and objectivity, then you're the one at fault. In the service of which probably more labor, gold, acuteness, and patience have been spent than on any actual science hitherto. Are you shitting on philosophy? Actual science. A pseudoscience is still a science. It's just somewhat of a science. We owe to... And also... gold? More labor, gold has been spent on the dogmas of philosophy. Why did you bring gold into this? I get labor, because a lot of people, get a kick out of thinking about things, but whatever. I don't think there's more gold spent on philosophy than science. Science is expensive. That's a lot of materials. We owe to it and to its super terrestrial pretensions. Oh wait, no, I've skipped a sentence. Have been spent than on any actual science hitherto. No, okay, I didn't. That is where I left off. We owe to it and to its super terrestrial pretensions in Asia and Egypt the grand style of architecture. I'm suddenly very lost. Are we still talking about philosophy? We owe to the philosophy of the dogmatists and its super terrestrial pretensions. Alien pretensions. In Asia and Egypt. Why these two places out of, all of the countries? Is it suddenly about aliens? And what the fuck is this about the grand style of architecture? Are you getting into believing that the aliens were the architects of humanity? That's an argument to be had, but I don't know that it fucking belongs in philosophy. To each their own. It seems that in order to inscribe themselves upon the heart of humanity with everlasting claims, all great things have first to wander about the earth as enormous and awe-inspiring caricatures. Dogmatic philosophy has been a caricature of this kind. Of what kind? Of a wandering kind? Of a pilgrim? Bullshit. For instance, if it was a wandering kind, it wouldn't be able to provide people with ego on the premise of just, regurgitating what they heard rather than thinking about it. Or providing an ego having not thought about it and still challenging it, much like the preface seems to be doing. For instance, the Vedanta doctrine in Asia and Platonism in Europe. Why mention that as the preface to what Nietzsche is saying? This is a shit preface. Whoever wrote this, hopefully it's not Nietzsche themselves. What the fuck relevance is this? Beyond good and evil, right? What is the relevance? Aliens? I guess you wouldn't be able to say that aliens exist in morality or ethics, as morality and ethics are subjective to culture and community and society, which I would presume aliens exist outside of or have one that we don't have the ability to fully study and appreciate. So maybe that's why it's saying this, because it's so far beyond what we know. Maybe that's what it is. Let us not be ungrateful to philosophy. As you sound incredibly ungrateful, but that's just me. Although it must certainly be confessed that the worst, the most tiresome, and the most dangerous of errors hitherto, stop saying hitherto, has been a dogmatist error. The worst one. Okay. There have been a lot of fucking errors, mistakes, but sure, the worst one. All right. Namely, Plato's invention of pure spirit. Jesus. This person does not provide a good argument, just shits on others and follow suit because I'm a bitch and I'm gonna talk down on everything, and if you don't follow suit, you're gonna look like a bitch. Fucking provide a good argument against it or shut the fuck up. Plato's invention of pure spirit and the good in itself. So good is capitalized and itself is capitalized, making them proper nouns. I don't know why that happened, to be real. I can't say that this is, to be understood as entities unto themselves. I think those could have been left uncapitalized, but whatever. But now when it has been surmounted, when Europe, rid of this nightmare, Jesus, can again draw breath freely and at last enjoy a healthier sleep, we, whose duty is wakefulness itself, are the heirs of all the strength which the struggle against this error has fostered. This person is wildly delusional, and I'm not sitting here and trying to set up an argument for the soul, because I'll know when I die. That's where I stand on it. There's no point in arguing something I definitively do not have the ability to know. I appreciate, researching into it and trying to understand it more, but I don't appreciate taking a strong stance against or for it, in that there is literally no way to know it. But whose duty is wakefulness itself. If you suffer insomnia, you start to hallucinate, and you can suffer from delusions of grandiosity. And given the level of egotism that this writer has, I'm wondering if they have gone on too long not sleeping. Your body needs sleep to be able to readjust. Whose duty is wakefulness. Your duty is to rest when you need rest, and to work when you need to work. Your duty is to understand and communicate, not only with yourself, but everything around you. That's what your fucking duty is, at the very goddamn least. Holy hell. And why has your life come to a point in which contemplation of the soul, or maybe even understanding everybody around you, understanding that the soul exists, has caused you to struggle? Unless you feel at large condemned for not taking care of it, but I guess, if that provides you a sort of strength, having been condemned provided your unbelief in a soul, strength is strength. Sure. It amounted to the very inversion of truth. So says you. You have yet to provide a good argument. And the denial of the perspective, the fundamental condition of life. To speak of spirit and the good as Plato spoke of them, indeed, one might ask, as a physician, how did such a malady attack the finest product of antiquity, Plato? I would have to understand the context. I have yet to get to Plato. What is the greatest invention of antiquity? And how does the understanding of the soul attack that? Providing context for your argument would have been nice, but presumably everybody's supposed to know everything right off the bat because you're supposed to. That's the way to network, is to act like you know everything, or already have been installed with all this information from a young age, because silver spoon, anybody else can't keep up in there and everybody else knows who to network with. I'm not saying this is classism, but I'm not saying it isn't. Too many negatives. Okay, so perspective also is italicized. And then there's a hyphen to the fundamental condition with another hyphen leading to of life. So that would lead me to believe that perspective is life? Subjectivity in and of itself is not life, but subjectivity gives way to why or how one exists and what one can conclude from that existence, but it is not the fundamentality of life. It is merely an aspect of it. So, there are too many disagreements between me and whomever wrote this preface. Oh, it says it at the end. Sils Maria Upper Engadine. Is Upper one of their last names? Cool. June 1885. So I have the benefit of hindsight is 2020, being in 2025. To argue this person. And if Maria is a sentiment of this person being female at all, in 1885 they would not have been respected as a philosopher. So it would have been a really good move on their part to debase anything and everything that they don't agree with by utilizing, harsh tones and making demands of everyone else that they either stand with or stand against due to the harsh level of critique they'd be facing. So there's my consideration. So we were at, of this perspective, the fundamental condition of life, to speak of spirit and the good as Plato spoke of them. Indeed, one might ask as a physician, how did such a malady attack that finest product of antiquity? Plato had the wicked Socrates. Socrates was not wicked. Really corrupted him. Was Socrates, after all, a corrupter of youths and deserved his hemlock? Okay. Maybe, again, I don't have context. Maybe Socrates was a rapist. Also, hemlock is, as much as I understand it, an offering one would give onto Persephone as they traveled down to hell, or for safe passage into hell. Or no. No. I got that wrong. Sorry. I think hemlock was the poison that if you were of nobility or of a high position, you were offered instead of suffering an ignoble death. Otherwise. But the struggle against Plato, or to speak plainer, and for the people, well, you have not been talking for the people, but okay. The struggle against the ecclesiastical oppression of millenniums of Christianity, for Christianity is Platonism for the people. So this person, I'm understanding, just hates Christianity. And Christianity is not the only religion that believes in a soul. Although there are many religions that adapted their understanding based around Christianity being so prominent. And translations of different languages, it could very well be that one understanding of a soul does not translate to the same understanding of a soul elsewhere. So I do understand and kind of appreciate the dislike of being ruled and not having freedom to believe in what you want, given I was born in the US in the 1990s, so born into freedom of choice of religion. Produced in Europe a magnificent tension of souls such as had not existed anywhere previously. That seems mildly unlearned. With such a tensely strained bow, one can now aim a bow. Tensely strained bow. One can now aim at the furthest goals. As a matter of fact, the European feels this tension as a state of distress, and twice attempts, have been made in grand style to unbend the bow, once by means of Jesuitism, and the second time by means of democratic enlightenment. I wonder what the example of democratic enlightenment is. You vote on how you are to be enlightened? Which, with the aid of liberty of the press and newspaper reading, might in fact bring it about that the spirit would not so easily find itself in distress. Now the argument is that the spirit does exist and it can read. I'm just being mean. Sorry. I don't know exactly when Europe would have... Okay, I can't actually speak on Europe. Do they have freedom of religion? As an ignorant American, I have to ask. I want to say that people are less stressed now from what I can understand, so I would say yeah. It used to be back, millennia ago, that whomever took the seat of ruler decided the religion based on what it was that they praised. So during times of incredible turmoil, there could be a king sat on the throne for only a year, and sometimes these kings and queens would change out so frequently that peoples that were ruled over would have to change out their religion likewise so frequently, and therein would be incredibly distressed by this. And I think after so many generations of this happening, it could very well sow in not only a distrust of religion, but also hatred of having to be ruled by it. And if you exist in that, I don't know that you would want to take time to contemplate the things that you could stand by regarding that religion and things you don't want to stand by. Especially if everyone around you is told just follow suit and don't think for yourself. It'd be very hard to stand alone in that crowd and without being angry. So I can understand where this person is coming from, but I don't necessarily appreciate the tone by which they're writing this and the means by which they chose to argue this. The Germans invented gunpowder. All credit to them. Did they? Maybe? Okay. But they again made things square. They invented printing. So all credit to them was a means of demonizing them? Okay. But we who are neither Jesuits nor Democrats nor even sufficiently Germans, so this is praising them, sufficiently Germans, we good Europeans and free, very free spirits, we have it still. So spirits is not synonymous with soul. All the distress of spirit and all the tension of its bow, and perhaps also the arrow, the duty, and who knows, the goal to aim at. ... Egotism. I don't know if that's a common trait that all Europeans hold, or if it's just a trait held by this individual representing all of Europeans. But this person's hope was that during 1885, European peoples would usher in a change for their country where religion understood the ruling over the body, whether there be a soul or not, and the morals and ethics inclined towards saving that soul or not having to save something that doesn't exist. And then making a war call at the end of it, call to arms at the end of it, of everybody ought to fall in line to do exactly what I want them to do, which is move away from Christianity at large. And also, how can you say you're free when you have express such a hatred of being forced to contemplate the soul? And blame it on Plato? Is that because you're too proud to blame the Catholic Church, which is situated in Europe? Okay. Hey, so I had to go do something. I now forget what it was. But I'm back from outer space. Still reading Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche, holy shit. And it's chapter 1, Prejudices of Philosophers. 1. The will to truth, which is to tempt us to many a hazardous enterprise, the famous truthfulness of which all philosophers have hitherto spoken with respect. What questions has this will to truth not laid before us? I feel like the whole of that lacked substance. It felt empty. Why is there a list? From where does this list come? What is this list addressing? Is it the list of the prejudices? Are we listing the prejudices? Of which one of the prejudice is the will to truth. Willing to be honest? Wanting to be honest is tempting people into harmful endeavors? Huh. I reiterate, maybe this video, maybe another video, I don't think it's wrong to lie. I think it depends on the subjectivity of the lie and the situation. I tell my significant other all the time, if it's going to save my life, lie to me. If it's something that's going to cause me harm by knowing it, I'd rather not know it. So is it hazardous that there are questions that will never be answered? Is that the harm? Is the harm that you're forever stuck in curiosity? It feels so empty. Where did the sentence start from? What is it addressing? How did it conclude? None of it lands on anything solid. What strange, perplexing, questionable questions. Is this a children's book? What is this pointlessness? It is already a long story, yet it seems as if it were hardly commenced. Well, it wouldn't... Sorry, my brain just confused the word commenced with condensed. That's my fault. Sure, it hasn't been started because you certainly haven't fucking said anything. I don't think that's what he's addressing here, though, but I'm still going to insult the shit out of this writing style. Is it any wonder if we at last grow distrustful, lose patience, and turn impatiently away? We, as in humanity, at any point in time throughout history? Certainly Nietzsche would not still be famous if that were the case. Pontification for pontification's sake. That the Sphinx teaches us at last to ask questions ourselves. Good. Who is it really that puts questions to us here? Your ego. What really is this will to truth in us? An attempt at perfection? In fact, we made a long halt at the question as to the origin of this will. Ego. Ego is the source of the will. Desire to do anything. The egoic structure being a survival mechanism implanted through evolutionary process meant to sustain humanity and tempt humanity into continuing to live. And it becomes rather difficult to live if all you ever do is lie. In fact, we made a long halt at the question as to the origin of this will, until at last we came to an absolute standstill before a yet more fundamental question. We inquired... I feel like there's a hell of a lot that I missed out on. Who's we? When did we inquire? When did we get to the standstill? What is being addressed? I feel like I just dove into the deep end and I was ill-prepared. None of this seems to be in order. There's something I'm missing. Okay, so the more fundamental question, we inquired about the value of this will. Oh. How much being wanting of doing something matters? Well, that depends on what it is being done. Is it important to ask questions and therein, is it important to pursue truth? Subjective. And therein the value is subjective per the situation, so you'd have to address a very specific situation. Again, no substance. Granted that we want the truth, why not rather untruth? He just asked why we don't want lies. The point of philosophy is to understand things better. Why would you pursue lies? This seems like fluff. Like word count. This is pointless questions for pointless sake. And uncertainty, even in ignorance. The problem of the value of truth presented itself before us, or was it we who presented ourselves before the problem? Egotism. If we present ourselves before the problem, we presume that we have any capacity to control a situation. Egotism. And why would we not want uncertainty and ignorance and lies? The understanding is that is what we receive generally. At least that's my understanding. That's what I receive generally. Where I exist generally is uncertainty, ignorance, and I'm not often in the presence of people who respect me enough to tell me the truth of what's going on. So most people want contrast as to be able to perfectly appreciate what exists. So if that's all I know, and I don't mean to speak as though I am all of humanity, I would want contrast. I guess if all you've ever had is everybody's honesty and knowledge, and you are all-knowing, the ability to appreciate things would be through the opposite. They do say that some of the smartest people, or the majority of people that are smart, suffer extreme depression. But then, philosophically, there is, I know enough to know I know nothing, so... cyclical. And we're presenting things because we're egotists. Okay, so which of us is the Oedipus here? Whoa. Nietzsche. The fuck, man? Just dove right in. I don't feel the need to conquer everything. Whether that be the head of the household or the ability to control my subconscious. Most of the time I let things ride. I would love to say that I am... what is that? Self-actualizing and perfectly in control of my subconscious. But I reside in the understanding in the absolute perfect capacity to realize that I am imperfect. And I'm fine with that. I don't think everybody exists to be an Oedipus. And I think it's kind of mildly problematic to look at every single thing as though it ought to be conquered. The majority of things simply ought to be understood and appreciated. Once you conquer things, what's left? Who's Oedipus and who's the Sphinx? Wow. Who's gonna conquer everything and who's gonna riddle everything? Batman. You know, in another regard, Sphinx, asks questions, but the Sphinx is a guard. So, who's the conqueror and who's guarding all the secrets? Why would anyone be guarding anything, especially when humanity at large is just ignorant? No need to hide anything. You could just keep it out in the open and they're never gonna bother to fucking look for it. Majority of people don't even give a shit to open a book. Fuck. You could just write all the secrets of the world down in a book and put it plainly in everybody's sight and nobody's gonna fucking give a shit. Although this is a different time. Sorry, 2025 versus whatever fucking year he wrote this book. It would seem to be a rendezvous of questions. Well, if you ask a lot of questions, it would be. Doesn't mean what you asked was necessarily worth asking. This feels like a waste of time. And notes of interrogation. I certainly do not feel interrogated. Who is being interrogated? Because this was pointless. If someone sat me down in a room and attempted to interrogate me with this bullshit, I may fall asleep. This is not how you run an interrogation. And could it be believed that it at last seems to us as if the problem had never been propounded before? Well, certainly if it's not worth propounding, it wouldn't have been. Well, I can't say that. Humanity is full of faults. They probably propounded it. As if we were the first to discern it. Egotist, get a sight of it, egotist, and risk raising it? Why is that a question? Jesus. For there is risk in raising it, perhaps there is no greater risk. In raising the truth? In raising the problem. There's a risk in raising the problem? Well, the problem exists to be solved, and I would presume herein that the author is the Oedipus. Nietzsche is the Oedipus. Nietzsche proposes that he is both the Oedipus and the Sphinx. If Oedipus were the Sphinx, he would not have attempted to fuck his mother. 2. Again, why the fuck is there a list? How could anything originate out of its opposite? Science has come a decent way since then, and even saying that, still has some way to go. But I was reading in another book that there's a transitional phase between something akin to or rather, let's take this for an example, solid to liquid. And this transitional phase is a hexagonal phase, where the property, how do I say that? The property of it being a solid shifts in seemingly layers into tiny hexagons, and these hexagons then shifted into a different form of itself, and likewise different chemical composition, granted the matter being perceived. How can anything arise from its opposite? Through shifting, through phasing, utilizing integrity, structural differences. Oscillation would be a good way of putting that. For example, truth out of error. Whoa, okay, so we went a different direction with that. My bad. Probably took that too literally. Okay. How can truth come from... Whoa. How is error the opposite of truth? I feel like error is not... It's the third option there. The opposite of truth is a lie, and that's not necessarily an error. An error would imply an ignorance, a lack of fault, where the opposite of truth, being a lie, implies knowledge of having done this. What is the word that I am looking for here again? Accountability. Conclusion. Bare minimum I have read. Nietzsche is a child. Or the will to truth out of the will to deception. How can you get the will to tell the truth from the will to tell a lie? Well, two things can exist at the same time in the same person. That does not mean that one arises from the other. Or you've deceived so much you've grown weary of yourself and you want to tell the truth now. That could also be nuance. But why are we contemplating this? This seems mildly pointless again. Prejudices of philosophers. Is this a list of prejudices? Things are... predisposed to. All it's done is ask questions. This can't be a list of prejudices then, because it's not landed on anything finite. This is bizarre. This is a bizarre reading. There's gotta be someone smarter than me who can tell me what the fuck is up. But, I missed something. Or the generous deed out of selfishness. Again, you did so much selfish shit, you get weary of your own bullshit. Then you want to do the opposite. Contrast is why people continue to live. They seek out contrast in order to provide themselves a sense of importance or a sense of, continuation in life. You have it too good, you need to provide yourself some shit. Find issue with the water bottle you got handed. Why are we asking pointless questions? 'Cause it goes on. Or the pure sun-bright vision of the wise man out of covetousness. Well, those don't seem necessarily related. And why would someone who is wise have a twinkle in his eye? That implies, not ignorance, but childlike ideation, innocence. How can you both be innocent and wise? And why is being covetous the opposite of being innocent and wise? Wisdom is letting things go? I can't argue that if that's what is being said here. But the relevance is lost on me still. Such genesis is impossible. Bullshit! I just came up with things. Fuck. Whoever dreams of it is a fool. Okay, I'm fine with being foolish. It's part of being human. Fuck it. Although dreaming of it versus conceiving it, maybe that makes me somewhat smart. I don't know. Probably not. That's probably whatever. Nay, worse than a fool. Things of the highest value must have a different origin. So he called people an idiot and then immediately said nothing. Okay, things of the highest value must have a different origin. How can something arise from the opposite? Well, it can apparently, according to Nietzsche, arise from the opposite only if it is valued highly, but value is subjective, per the eye of the perceiver, so is everyone an idiot? I'm really feeling like one right now. In this transitory, seductive, Nietzsche needs to just sit down somewhere. Just sit down. What about any of this is seductive? How is this drawing you in? How is something shifting, changing, drawing you in? Do you want to change? Are you upset with yourself? Do you not like yourself? Illusory, paltry word. Oh, which word? Nope. Misread that. World. Ha! I spoke too soon. Okay, so he believes that the world is seductive and paltry. Wow. He's seduced by something that is lowly? Not enough? Okay, I picked issue in the first place just because, I find it fun to pick at everything. But then there was something actually to pick at. How are you seduced by something that you don't actually like? And what about this world is transitory? It seems everything repeats. Everything repeats. We'll ruin the world until it fixes that problem, gets rid of it, and then we'll go through the process all over again. And humanity has a tendency to repeat history. Sometimes multiple points of history all at once. Like we're suffering in the US revolution of women's rights, gay rights, repeal of gay rights and women's rights. We're going through another stock market crash, or we're looking towards another stock market crash. We are suffering from, what did they call that? Bootlegging? There's certain drugs that used to be legal that are no longer legal. Other drugs are, again, being pushed onto society and not being claimed, though they are causing a lot of damage. There's war rationing. There's diet fads again. Opium crisis again. We're repeating a lot of points in history all at once. So I don't believe it's transitory. I think it's just constantly repeating the same things. Not necessarily in transition. I would presume transition means that the end result is different than anything we've had, and it seems to not be the pattern being created. In this turmoil of delusion and cupidity, where did the delusion come from? unless everybody's suffering from it, which again, fuck it, not gonna argue that. They cannot have their source, but rather in the lap of being, in the intransitory and the concealed God, in the thing in itself. Okay. Being is capitalized. It's in the lap of existing, in the intransitory, in what is not in transition, in the concealed God. Why is there a concealed God? What is this alluding to? Concealed from us? Concealed by us? In the thing in itself, there must be their source and nowhere else. Something has to arise from itself, not its opposite. False. This mode of reasoning discloses the typical prejudice by which metaphysicians of all times can be recognized. Mode of reasoning. Was that reason? Because that did not sound like reason. That sounded like a lot of bullshit questions. That's not reason. That is not reason. Discloses the typical prejudice by which metaphysicians of all times can be recognized. They can be recognized through idiotic pondering of things that don't hold much significance. Maybe that was too mean of me. Maybe that was a bad take. Okay, so the mode of reasoning was that something cannot exist having arisen from the opposite of itself. And that is being listed as the predisposition of metaphysicians of all times. So I assume I have been an ass. And I have critiqued Nietzsche as though that was his opinion, where he is saying that it is the opinion of most philosophers. Although this is the first time I have seen the term metaphysicians used synonymously with philosophers, and that's interesting. As I would assume metaphysicians to be more synonymous with scientists and psychology and philosophy are pseudosciences, if philosophy can even be considered a science. This mode evaluation is at the back of all their logical procedure. Through this belief of theirs, they exert themselves for their knowledge. The belief that something cannot arise from nothing, or something cannot arise from its opposite. For something that is, in the end, solemnly Christianed the truth. Is this, because he capitalizes truth here, so is this the one and only truth? Or is he saying that this one prejudice must be true by their understanding? If that were the case, then he wouldn't have capitalized the truth, I don't think. The fundamental belief of metaphysicians is the belief in antithesis of values. Whoa. How can you have the opposite of something that remains subjective? The opposite is too fluctuating to be able to hold it as one thing. So there could not be one antithesis to values. There would be multiple, given the value being perceived. It never occurred even to the wariest of them to doubt here on the very threshold where doubt, however, was most necessary. Though they had made a solemn vow, de omnibus dubitandum. What? For it may be doubted, firstly, whether antithesis exists at all. How? The opposite of things definitely do exist. Unless you are to argue that we're all made out of carbon-based life, and therein essentially nothing could be the opposite of that, as we exist where we are. And then you would have to conclude that Earth is the only thing to exist, that there could not be another base of life elsewhere. So I'm not sure who's arguing this anymore, but I don't agree with whatever argument's being posed. And secondly, whether the popular valuations and antithesis of value upon which metaphysicians have set their seal are not perhaps merely superficial estimates, merely provisional perspectives. Besides being probably made from some corner, perhaps from below, frog perspectives, as it were, to borrow an expression current among painters. Yeah, philosophy is full of superficial estimates. I'm not sure why this is needing to be said. Of course it's provisional perspectives. What's the point of this? In spite of all the value which may belong to the true, the positive, and the unselfish, it might be possible that a higher and more fundamental value for life generally should be assigned to pretense, to the will to delusion. Whoa. To selfishness and cupidity. In spite of all the value that a higher and more fundamental value for life generally should be assigned to falsehood, to the will to be deluded, to selfishness and cupidity. The only thing that I can agree with there is selfishness. To be entirely selfless is ironically to be selfish, because in a society rather than a community, you are setting yourself up to need to be taken care of by someone who may or may not have resources to take care of you and themselves. And therein, currently, as we stand and as we exist, to be selfless is to be selfish. You put yourself out to need to be taken care of by others. And that's what I understand to be a fundamental truth, and in some regards, not all regards, selfishness is needed. Like, you need to be selfish when it relates to taking care of yourself, and like they teach you on a plane, you put your oxygen mask on first and then you take care of others. There are certain levels of selfishness that are needed. But as far as everything else here is concerned, I don't think that it's of higher value or more fundamental to live out a falsehood. As I've done that, multiple times, and it's a huge waste of time and a huge waste of effort. And it's not fun, and it gets you fucking nowhere, and it puts everybody out around you. So I'm not sure what, he was huffing. His own farts, for instance, when he wrote this. I don't get the point of asking these questions, unless it's just simply to ask questions for the fuck of it. It might even be possible that what constitutes the value of those good and respected things consists precisely in their being insidiously related, knotted, and crocheted to these evil and apparently opposed things. Alright, that I can agree with. You know, you wouldn't have anything good if evil did not exist. But my understanding of what is good and evil, what is good is what is necessary, what is evil is what is unnecessary. So perfection would be had as a middle ground between all of these things. Maybe not a middle ground, sorry, but perfection would be had at only what is necessary. Never what is unnecessary. And therein, perfection would be had with no one able to understand what they do have. And in that, I don't think anyone would have conception of love, hate, fury, sadness, joy. None of these would exist. There would only be content. There would be no need to be grateful. There would be no need to say sorry. And therein arises, would you even need to exist? So the value of having the opposite, having something to detract from the positive, it is valued because of the contrast. It is valued because of the understanding it provides in having had a contrast to what is positive. So I don't disagree that there is a value there, but I do disagree in it being of higher value. I feel like this man has existed in comfort to such an extent that he now hates it and hates everybody else for existing only in comfort. Perhaps, but who wishes to concern himself with such dangerous perhapses? How is it dangerous? What? I am missing so many things. For that investigation, one must await the advent of a new order of philosophers, such as will have other tastes and inclinations, the reverse of those hitherto prevalent, philosophers of the dangerous perhaps, in every sense of the term. Hitherto? Sorry, I'm beginning to really hate the word hitherto. Why is there an investigation now being done into the dangerous philosophers who contemplate the contrast of life and the value of contrast? Am I going to be investigated? Nah, I'm not a philosopher. I'm just a curious person who asks too many questions. And to speak in all seriousness, I see such new philosophers beginning to appear. Well, cool. Yeah, I think he just got tired of staunch old men that were too comfortable. That's all that spells out to me. So that was 1 and 2. 1 seemed incredibly pointless, and 2 seemed mostly pointless until it reached the end. And even then, I think it's just a personal gripe of his more than it is pointed towards a generality of philosophy. But if that's what you need to hear in life, yippee! I had to go blow my nose. So I just read 1 and 2 off of the chapter 1 being prejudices of philosophers, and I suck. You know, I made a lot of assumptions at the beginning of what the fuck Nietzsche was getting at. Having done so all the same, my conclusions I stand by. I think I'm just gonna read 3 and 4 here of chapter 1 as I looked at it, and it goes on for a number of pages, and I rant way too fucking much for that to all fit in one video. So 3 says, having kept a sharp eye on philosophers and having read between their lines long enough, and I went on a rant before when I made this video and didn't hold the microphone. If you force people to guess at what you are saying, I don't think you deserve the right to be called a philosopher. I think the point of philosophy is to teach other people by way of what it is that you are questioning. To question things and then lead people into that understanding that you are hoping to get at yourself. And if you're not doing that, if you're not being forthright with what it is that you are doing, and instead you are utilizing subliminal speech and forcing people to guess at what it is that you actually mean by what you're saying, you're just an asshole who lauds your intelligence over other people, and at that point it's not even intelligence, or rather it's not even deserved that you laud it, because if you make something inaccessible and then laugh at someone for not having it, that doesn't mean that they would not have had it otherwise. It does not mean that they would not have naturally come by it. It means that you are lying about something. You're lying about the accessibility of it. You're lying about their capacity to have it. You're lying about you having it, possibly. It makes you a fucking twat. It doesn't make you a good teacher. And I think that's the point of being a philosopher, is that you aim to teach the conclusions you stand by in having wondered about things. I now say to myself that the greater part of conscious thinking must be counted among the instinctive functions. I don't think conscious thinking is instinctual. At all. In fact, I think subconscious thinking is more instinctual. And it is so even in the case of philosophical thinking. That conscious thinking is instinctive? Well, maybe that's a difference of times. Because in 2025, people are stuck on survival more than they feel they have the privilege, safety to pointlessly contemplate things. One has here to learn anew as one learned anew about heredity and innateness. Heredity, what is inherited, and as much as I understand it, which is limited, heredity is genetically inherited. And what is innate is just simply what is. I don't know how else to put that. It's just what exists. Genetically inherited. Why? Isn't that a field of sociology and anthropology more than it's a field of philosophy to try to understand what is genetically inherited? Have I missed something? As little as the act of birth comes into consideration in the whole process and procedure of heredity, I am lost. Just as little is being conscious opposed to the instinctive in any decisive sense. What you just said, conscious thinking is instinctive. It must be counted among the instinctive. So how is being conscious opposed to the instinctive? What is happening? Oh, I read is as. Well, that changed the sentence entirely. I apologize. In procedure of heredity, just as little is being conscious opposed to the instinctive in any decisive sense. Okay, but I still don't agree that, being conscious is instinctive. I think that's a choice. Influenced by his instincts. Oh, I missed a line. The greater part of the conscious thinking of a philosopher is secretly influenced by his instincts. Secretly meaning subconsciously? I think it could have been phrased differently. This just makes it seem more unattainable the understanding to be more unattainable? Secretly. Go away. Is secretly influenced by his instincts and forced into definite channels. If conscious thinking was instinctive, then yeah, it would be forced into definite channels. But subconscious thinking is instinctive. Conscious thinking is non-instinctive. It is worked on. It is performed for. It is consciously done. So it can only be forced into definite channels if in your conscious state you refuse to adapt. You chose to be conscious and then stunted your own growth by refusing to acknowledge change. That does not mean that conscious thinking is instinctive. And the definite channels is only capable of being definite if, it relies on a subjective reality, that of which being stunted growth. But that isn't to say that it is all reality. And behind all logic and its seeming sovereignty of movement, there are valuations, or to speak more plainly, physiological demands. Or to speak more plainly, let me say it in a way that sounds complicated. Fucking ass. Sovereignty of movement. There are valuations, physiological demands for the maintenance of a definite mode of life. Why is that being brought up now? I mean, yeah, your physical definitely plays into how you live life, but what the fuck is the relevance? And logic is not the sovereign of all movement. Otherwise, car crashes would not happen. Jesus, what a perfect world he must live in. Holy crap. For example, that the certain is worth more than the uncertain. Who said that? Because I didn't say that. I may not know what happens in the future. That does not devalue the future. Jesus. That illusion is less valuable than truth. A lot of people would argue that. There's a whole movie about it. The Illusionist. He sets up this whole act. People pay loads of money to go see it. And then tricks loads of people. And is able to be with his loved one because he performed illusion. I'm not going to be able to get that word. Quote unquote magic. The type of magic that's just sleight of hand. So in some respects, it has more value. It just, again, nuance. Depends on the situation. What's happening. Why it's being contemplated. Such valuations, in spite of their regulative importance for us, who are you groping in with yourself? Go away. Might, notwithstanding, be only superficial valuations. Special kinds of, that's a word that I cannot pronounce and I will butcher it, so be forewarned. Nyasari, such as may be necessary for the maintenance of being such as ourselves. Again, I'm not sure if he's arguing other people or he's concluded these himself, but I have arguments. I stand by my arguments. Supposing, in effect, that man is not just the measure of things. No, time is the measurement of things. The degradation of things. Man is the measure of things. Man is the observation of things that happen to it. No, that's not what man is. Man is the ability to observe. Man is not measure, though. Man can be measured and things can be measured against man, but man is the ability to observe. Yep, I stand by that. So 4, the falseness of an opinion is not for us any objection to it. An opinion that is bullshit is not an objection to it. That doesn't make sense. To what? To what? It's not an objection to what? It is here perhaps that our new language sounds most strangely. Good goddamn does it? Okay. The question is, how far an opinion is life furthering, life preserving, species preserving, perhaps species rearing? Holding an opinion doesn't change the outcome of a situation. It is the observation of a situation. Your action changes the outcome of the situation. So the action you choose to take from the observation you made is what would be life-furthering, life-preserving, species-preserving, or species-rearing. It's the action. But I guess the observation would be the catalyst. But I don't know that the blame could lie on the observation itself for what results from an action taken from the observation. Even in it being a catalyst, because likewise you could choose to not take an action even with the observation or because of the observation. The action is what defines all of these things, so not sure what he's getting at. And we are fundamentally inclined to maintain that the falsest opinions to which the synthetic judgments a priori belong. If it's a priori, can it be synthetic? A priori is what is innate to the human. As far as I understand it, a priori is built-in function of existing. There's a better word for it, and it's just beyond me at the moment. Instinctual. A priori is instinct. So synthetic judgments instinctually belong to false opinions. Are not judgments synonymous with opinions? Therein, false judgment is synonymous with synthetic opinion. And the a priori is not needed there? Because instinct is not relevant? Are the most indispensable, false opinions are the most indispensable to us, that without a recognition of logical fictions. How can it be logical and a fiction? A logical lie? Logically, you could conceive of it, but it's still a lie? Without a comparison of reality with the purely imagined world of the absolute and immutable, without a constant counterfeiting of the world by means of numbers, man could not live. Oh. Our aesthetic appreciation accounts for a lot, I will admit. So if everything is binary code, man would not be able to take as much joy from it if he could not observe the aesthetic that arises from the creation of the binary code. I can agree with that. And therein, the evaluation of what is a lie, what is a delusion, is valued highly because it adds in to man's want to continue to live. Well, then you'd have to argue, is the continuation of life valuable? Which I guess a lot of people would argue for. That the renunciation of false opinions would be a renunciation of life. A negation of life. Nah, you can renounce reality. That doesn't make you less alive. To recognize untruth as a condition of life, that is certainly to impugn the traditional ideas of value in a dangerous manner. This man finds danger in the weirdest places. Maybe he needs more contrast. These just seem logical. I don't find danger in what is logical. And a philosophy which ventures to do so has thereby alone placed itself beyond good and evil. Yeah. Good and evil are concepts based on perception of humanity. And perfection exists outside of these things. So, beyond, though, I'm not entirely sure that I agree with the beyond, but without, yeah. Okay, that was 3 and 4. Well, that was 1, 2, 3, and 4. And all of my arguments. I can't say I outright disagree with Nietzsche, but I do think that he writes for the word count. That he views the world as something to conquer. Every problem needs to be solved. And he has control issues. Also, fucking does not like his peers. He doesn't like people that exist in too much comfort and probably thinks they're very boring. Which I don't disagree with. I think ultimately I like him. Yep. Okay, bye.